Alright, so we finally got the early access info for Honkai Star Rail's most controversial character yet. So now that we have Castorice's full kit here, today I want to go over her entire kit and just talk about her overall value to see whether or not you should be pulling for her on your account, especially with her being such a divisive character with the global passive and everything. But we're going to go over all the details here and I'll give you all my opinion on it. So starting out with her kit here, Castorice is a Quantum Remembrance character and she is a main DPS. Her basic attack is just a single target hit, but it's not something you're really going to be using too much since a lot of her kit does focus around HP consumption and healing. Then for Castorice's skill, she's going to consume 30% of all allies' current HP. So with that, right off the bat, you already are going to want a sustain on her team, mainly a healer, just to make sure that your allies aren't dying, because you do want to have them with as much HP as possible once it gets to Castorice's turn, so that you can get this HP consumption here. And you are going to deal a blast attack with this skill. Then one of the main points of Castorice's gameplay is her ultimate. When you use her ultimate, you're going to summon a Netherwing, which is her Memo Sprite. So upon summoning Netherwing will have a 100% action advance, so it'll automatically take action. It will have an initial speed of 165, and its max HP is equal to the amount of New Bud, which we're going to go over more in the talent, but New Bud is Castorice's special type of energy, which makes her a character similar to Acheron and Feisha, where they get their ultimate through a different means than the traditional energy system. And the Netherwing will also gain the buff from Castorice's talent as well, if that buff is active, which we will go over once we get to the talent. Then also, when using her ultimate, it's going to create the Lost Netherland territory. And whenever the Lost Netherland territory is active, all enemies will have a 20% all-type resistance debuff. So you are just going to be dealing more damage in general when you have this ultimate up, which is really nice. And when Netherwing has 3 turns in battle, or if it loses all of its HP, it's going to disappear and the Lost Netherland territory is going to fade away. So moving on into the talent now, the first part of the talent, and honestly the most important part of the talent, is the New Bud mechanic. So the amount of New Bud that Castorice needs is based on the levels of the characters on your team. Now, most people are going to be running a team of full level 80s, and if you are, then Castorice is going to have 34,000 New Bud as her maximum. So you will gain 1 point of New Bud for every 1 HP point that is lost by any ally. And also, whenever allies lose HP as well, Castorice and Netherwing are going to get a 20% damage buff for 3 turns, and this buff can stack up to 3 times. So you are going to get some pretty solid damage increases for them as well as your characters are taking damage. Plus, with Castorice's skill, and also when we get to it, her enhanced skill, there is going to be a good amount of HP drain on the team. So even if allies aren't hit, they are still going to be losing HP. So when Castorice has the maximum amount of New Bud, which for most people, like I said, is 34,000, Castorice will be able to use her ultimate. And also with the talent, while the Netherwing is on the field, you cannot actually get any more New Bud. So you can't like pre-charge Castorice's ultimate while you have Netherwing out. Instead, any New Bud you would have gained will actually serve as healing for Netherwing, which is really good because as we get into more of the Memo Sprite stuff and the way that Netherwing works, it's actually good that we're able to heal it this way because there aren't really many ways that you can heal it. So now let's go into more about Netherwing. So we're going to talk about the Memo Sprite skill, and Netherwing actually has 2 different Memo Sprite skills here. The first one, Claw Splits the Veil. This one you probably won't be using too much unless you're in very specific situations, but this one is just an AoE quantum attack, and nothing really too crazy on it. But as I said, if you're in very specific situations, like if you're using Sunday, or you have just like some other situation where you want to keep the Netherwing on the field, then you'll be using this. But if not, you really are going to be focusing on the other Memo Sprite skill, Breath Scorches the Shadow. This skill is going to consume 25% of Netherwing's HP when it's used, and it's going to deal an AoE quantum hit based on Castorice's max HP. And the unique thing about Breath Scorches the Shadow is that using it one time is not going to end Netherwing's turn. When you use it, you're able to keep using it, and every time you use it consecutively in the same turn, it is going to increase the damage as well. So a lot of the time it is worth it to just completely burn through Netherwing's HP and get the most amount of damage from it, especially if you time it to where you have buffs active from your supports, and of course with the Lost Netherland territory as well. Also, if you use the Breath Scorches the Shadow while Netherwing's HP is less than or equal to 25%, then after that use, it's also going to trigger the Memosprite talent, Wing Sweep the Ruins, which we'll talk about in a moment here. So now to go to the Memosprite talent, there are 3 of them. Firstly, I guess we can start with Wing Sweep the Ruins because we just talked about it. So once Netherwing's HP, goes to 0, or you have it out for the 3 turns where it's going to disappear, it's actually going to do an explosion, which is going to deal some instances of quantum damage to a single random enemy. And when this happens, it's going to also provide a little bit of healing to all allies based on Castorice's max HP. Then for the next Memosprite talent, Moon Cocoon Shrouds the Form. This allows Netherwing to act as a backup for allies, and what this means is that if an ally is at 1 HP, instead of them falling and taking fatal damage, Netherwing will actually be able to take the hit for them, but at 500% of the original damage. And because of this special backup state, Netherwing cannot be actively targeted by enemies, and any blast-based abilities from your allies cannot benefit Netherwing either. So you're not going to be able to benefit him with things like Woho's healing, for example, since it is a blast effect towards the team. Then the last Memosprite talent is Roar Rumbles the Realm, and this one's pretty straightforward. Whenever Netherwing is on the field, he's going to give a 10% damage bonus for all allies, and that's going to last for 3 turns from when he's summoned. And considering that a lot of the time you are just going to burn through his HP completely right away, this buff should have some really good uptime. Next up for Castorice's Enhanced Skill. This one can only be triggered when Netherwing is on the field because it is a joint attack between Castorice and Netherwing, and through using it, instead of using a skill point, similar to this skill as well, which also doesn't use skill points, you are going to consume 40% of all allies' current HP. Next up for Castorice's technique, she's going to enter the Netherveil state for 20 seconds, and while this state is active, enemies cannot actively approach Castorice in the overworld. And when you start battle during this state, all enemies in Netherveil's range are going to get pulled into battle. And at the start of battle, it is going to summon Netherwing, which, similarly to the ultimate, it's going to create the Lost Netherland territory. It's going to give the Netherwing a 100% action advance. And you're also going to start with it only at 50% of the max Nubud's HP. So it's only going to have half of its health available to it. And will also consume 40% of all allies' current HP, obviously besides the Netherwing. So you are going to get the dragon there, a bit of a kind of nerfed version, and not having it be at full health, but that's fine because you probably don't have too many buffs active at the start of battle, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but it is good to get a nice burst of damage before the battle even starts. Plus, before Netherwing is summoned through the technique, Castorice will also gain 30% of her max Nubud as well, which is a pretty nice thing to have at the start of battle. Then before we get onto the traces, let's talk about the global passive, everyone's favorite thing to talk about for Honkai Star Rail here. So this passive is active just by having Castorice on your account. She doesn't have to be on your team for it to activate. Whenever allies receive fatal damage once per battle, not once per battle per ally, once per battle just in general, it's going to give them the Moon Cocoon state. And during this state, it's going to delay them falling to fatal damage for 1 turn. And during this turn, they can take their action normally, they can attack, they can do whatever. If during that turn they are healed or shielded, then the Moon Cocoon state is removed and they'll be able to survive and continue battle. But if they don't receive a shield or get any healing during that turn, then they will fall as they should have without the global passive. So pretty simple overall for how the passive itself works. I'm not going to get into the whole passive debate thing. I made a separate video on that already. So now let's go into her traces. So her Ascension 2 trace is going to be able to convert 100% of the healing that any ally gets into Nubud. which is really good because you're going to be able to get her ultimate a lot faster with this, especially with characters that are able to provide a lot of healing very consistently. And if Netherwing is on the field, this healing, instead of going to New Blood, will also be able to heal Netherwing as well. So once again, if you have those specific situations where you are keeping Netherwing on for more than one turn, getting its HP back up is going to be good to have it do as much damage as possible while it's staying on the field. And the amount of HP that is converted, or the amount of healing that's converted from each ally, can't exceed 12% of the maximum of New Blood, which I did calculate is about 4,000, HP of healing. And this limit will reset when that character takes their action. So pretty solid way overall to just get a lot more New Blood. Then for her A4, anytime Castorice has at least 50% of her max HP available, she's going to have a 40% speed buff. And whenever Netherwing deals fatal damage with the Breath Scorches the Shadow, it's also going to get 100% speed for one turn, which isn't something you're really going to see be effective too much, because a lot of the time the best thing to do is to just go full force and just have one turn with Netherwing. Then with the A6, when Netherwing uses Breath Scorches the Shadow, it's going to get a 30% damage increase, and this increase can stack up to 6 times as well, and it lasts until the end of the turn. Now, a lot of the times you won't get up to 6 stacks when you are, if you have like E0 S1 or E0 S0. I do believe that is a very late Eidolon kind of thing. So, the damage bonus is nice, but you won't hit the ceiling of it unless you have a lot more investment. Then lastly, for the traces and the base kit, for the stats, Castorice actually has some really good stats. She gets 18.7% crit rate, 13.3% crit damage, and 14.4% quantum damage. So I know that was a lot for her base kit here, but let's real quick talk about her Eidolons before we get into her value. So, Castorice's E1 makes it so that whenever the enemy's current HP is either at 80% less than Castorice's max HP or 50% or lower, then Netherwing's attacks will deal an additional percentage of the original damage multiplier, which is really nice to just get a pretty solid damage increase as you are depleting the enemy's HP. Then for her E2, Castorice is going to gain 2 stacks of Ardent Will when summoning Netherwing. This will only max out at 2 stacks, and there aren't any other ways to get stacks. And when you use Breath Scorches the Shadow, you are going to be able to use these stacks in replacement of the HP consumption. So you get 2 extra hits of Breath Scorches the Shadow, which is really nice. And also consuming these stacks will also advance Castorice's action by 100% as well, which is pretty good, especially if you are just going full throttle with the Breath Scorches the Shadow. Netherwing will explode, and then you'll immediately have Castorice there to drain the allies' HP again to start building up New Blood. And also, the next use of Enhanced Skill will give 30% of the max New Blood as well, which is a nice bonus there. Then for her E4, whenever Castorice is on the field, all allies get a 20% incoming healing bonus, so they will be able to heal even more, which means even more New Blood can be gained as well. Then lastly, for her E6, whenever Castorice and Netherwing deal damage, they're going to have a 20% Quantum Res Pen buff, and Netherwing is also able to ignore weakness types. And as well as just a little bonus, which I don't think will be too important, the bounce hits that are included with Wing Sweep the Ruin will be increased by 3, so that does give you a bit more, instances of damage there, but nothing really too crazy. So that's everything for her kit. I know it's a lot. She has a whole lot in her kit there. So now let's talk about her overall value. And I'm going to put aside the whole global passive, discourse and everything like that. Like I said, I made a video on it. Definitely go recommend checking that out if you're interested in how I feel about the global passive in general when it comes to the entire game. But in terms of Castorice as a character, I think she's a very strong DPS. Probably one of the stronger ones we have right now. And I like the way that she's handling HP consumption because it's kind of similar to how Jingliu worked, because Jingliu does consume HP from all allies besides herself just to deal more damage. But I like that Castorice's works both as HP consumption, but also the healing aspect as well still benefits her kit. And I think one of the biggest benefits of Castorice, which will kind of, you know, balance out the fact that her S1 is kind of necessary for her to have a good performance, is that her team is pretty reasonably, you know, accessible. Now, the only character I will understand people not having is Tribby, but Tribby is her best in slot support right now, which, I mean, you're going to be running her on 2 support teams anyways, but Tribby is like that main, you know, kind of character that's really going to benefit her a lot with all of her buffs, because Tribby's buffs aren't based on attack or anything like that. They are, you know, damage buffs, res pen buffs, that kind of stuff, which is really going to be good for an HP scaling DPS like Castorice. Then, Castorice's other best support is Remembrance MC, who is quite literally a free character. Then when it comes to sustains right now, I mean, we'll see how Hyacinth will be, because let's be real, without having dreams, you can tell she is going to be a healer based on how she is in the actual story, plus also that planar set that came out in 3.1. So that, yeah, we'll see how she is, but in terms of what's available in the game right now, probably Locha and Gallagher are going to be your best options. Now, Ho-Ho does give a decent amount of healing, but because her buffs are attack focused and energy focused, that just doesn't have synergy with Castorice here. And for Gallagher and Locha, they can heal pretty consistently and pretty effectively as well. So they are able to get a good amount of new blood regeneration going for Castorice. Plus, with Gallagher, you know, being a 4-star, he is pretty accessible, and Locha is going to be a free option. So technically he is accessible, though I'm not sure if I fully recommend him as a free, you know, option in 3.2. But, you know, we'll see. Depending on where your account is, you know, he could be fine to pick up. And now, if you don't have Tribby, or like you're missing a character for a support, you can definitely pair Castorice with other supports. Like Sunday can work, although I think there is a bit different of like a playstyle you'll have with him. But I don't have access to the creator experience stuff, so I haven't tested anything. And also, I think she probably does have some synergy with like My Day, since he does have his own HP consumption as well. So there could be something interesting there that, of course, I'll have to test out once I actually have Castorice on my account. So now I think that overall, if you're thinking about pulling for Castorice, I think someone who needs a strong DPS character or just a strong Quantum character in general, because let's be real, Quantum's been in a pretty bad state in Star Rail for a while. And Castorice is the first very strong Quantum character we've gotten in a long time. So I think if Quantum has kind of been, you know, bodying your account in terms of like weaknesses, I think Castorice is going to be very good. She's going to have some great performance at a lot of the end game, I think, just with the way her kit works. So you are going to have some good stuff there. And I think she also does have some potential to get even better with future releases. If we get a premium version of what Remembrance MC does, kind of like how we got Fugue for Harmony MC's role, I think that could be a better option for there as well with true damage buffing, but we'll see. And also with a better sustain as well. Like, once again, we'll see what Hyacinth does once we get the 3.3 info. But all in all, I think that Castorice is going to be a very strong DPS. I think it's going to be helpful for a lot of people, especially with how many Quantum Weak bosses we've gotten recently, with the Flame Reaver, with Nikador. So she's going to have a really good spot in the game right now. Plus, she just has a cool dragon, so, you know, what's not to love there? And I think really the only thing that would make me say maybe you don't need Castorice, I mean, other than if you are like so against the global passives that you're just not pulling for Castorice, which like kind of get that viewpoint, but again, not going to go super crazy on that in this video. The only reason I would say to skip Castorice is if you don't really need another DPS character, and if a like support or a sustain character would be better for your account in that case. But besides that, I think Castorice is going to be an insanely good character, but I'd love to hear what you all think in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed and want to see more content from me, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But with that, everyone, I will see you all next time.